Hello everyone, and welcome to another video, and today, we're going to start off by me asking you a question. How much salt does someone have to intake to cope and seethe over the fact that they'll never get to play a video game because it won't come out on their platform of choice due to said platform being underpowered, and the dev company doesn't want their game to have to make too many sacrifices to ensure that it'll run on that platform? I am, of course, referring to Harman Smith, or Cody Lee if you go by his pen name on Amazon. Yes, that's right. Even a year after Elden Ring's release, Cody is still coping and seething that he'll never get to play it, even though he says Elden Ring is below mid and very forgettable, when he seems to have forgotten about the world's most recent invention called a subjective opinion. I know, I'm just as shocked as all of you are over this new invention that only recently came out, and which we'll learn something about Cody Lee towards the end of the video. Anyways, let's just get this over with because I can already feel ulcers forming and my stomach lining.
So I've been talking a little bit about Elden Ring versus Breath of the Wild. I've been making kind of like a lot of snide comments regarding the Elden Ring situation, and I would like to take a moment to kind of reflect on why.
Harman, it doesn't take much guesswork to figure out why you constantly make comparisons between Elden Ring and Breath of the Wild. You do it because you're coping and seething and malding over the fact that it won't come to the Nintendo Switch. And the reason why it won't come to the Switch is because it literally can't run it. You look at what makes Elden Ring great, see that Elden Ring is better than Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, and you cry about it on camera for views. I'm guessing that you haven't been taking your 2 tablets of copium, the tablespoon of seethium, and the suppository of maldium like I told you to. Now, if you like Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom more than Elden Ring, then that's fine. I'll respect your opinion, but I expect you to respect my opinion in return. You understand, yes?
Kind of talk about like why I'm doing this, why I'm talking about such an irrelevant piece of last year's media that is Elden Ring.
And for someone who says that Elden Ring is last year, it's forgettable and below mid, you sure don't seem to mind bringing it up in almost every one of your videos, I noticed. Again, you're coping, seething, and malding, my guy.
Right? Tears of the Kingdom is already well on its way to outselling the game.
And that would be because Zelda is a more well-established IP from a more well-established game company that's been around for 30 years. The game IP. The company itself for over 100 years. That's why it will outsell Elden Ring, my guy.
It's going to destroy it. You know, if it wasn't for like, a couple of a handful of like troll reviews on Metacritic, Jim Sterling.
Jim Sterling actually liked Breath of the Wild, Cody. He gave it a 7 out of 10 after all. That sounds like he liked the game to me. Of course, a Nintendrone can't stand it when a non-Nintendrone doesn't like Breath of the Wild, or any Nintendo game for that matter, as much as they do. Because Jim liked Breath of the Wild, but not as much as the Nintendrones. They were sending him death threats and telling him to basically game over himself in real life. All because he dared to like Breath of the Wild, not nearly as much as the Nintendrones liked Breath of the Wild. Guarantee you that the exact same thing is going to happen with Tears of the Kingdom. Maybe give it a few days. Then again, no one takes Jim Sterling seriously anymore because he strayed away from talking about video games and the stuff that's wrong with the gaming industry nowadays, and he went into politics and lectures and why gamers suck and why Jim despises them. And it's for that reason why I and countless others abandoned Jim's sinking ship of a channel. He continues to bleed subscribers to this day, but Fratanga Plays already covered all of that, so I'll just link you to that video instead of reiterating everything Fratanga said here. Also, Jim Sterling has never used Metacritic or written a review there as far as I know, but I see that you have, so I guess I'll just say that it takes a troll to know one, huh?
Tears of the Kingdom would have a higher Metacritic score as well. Like, the industry did everything in its power to try and prop up Elden Ring, prop up From Software, prop up PlayStation, prop up, like, the anti-Nintendo agenda while downplaying Nintendo, and they still lost.
Cody? The only one I see propping up an agenda would be you, my guy. You're the one who is constantly claiming all the time that everyone is out to get Nintendo. Nothing can compete with Nintendo, nobody likes anything as much as they do Nintendo, and it's like, who is it that's setting up an agenda again? Anyways, what exactly did the industry do that was within its power to prop up this anti-Nintendo agenda that you keep bringing up that only you can see or notice. Also, Cody, are you not aware that Elden Ring also came out on PC and Xbox as well? Probably not, because you poop all over them the exact same way you do with PlayStation. I swear to God, Cody, what did Sony do? Strap the Nintendo logo down and proceed to paint unspeakable things on it in graffiti?
Right? That is what this all comes down to, essentially. Because last year, there was a very big coordinated effort to downplay Tears of the Kingdom as being something that was going to be a rehash of Breath of the Wild, that was not going to live up to the legacy of the original, that wasn't all that good anyway, and From Software was the real entry, was the real go, right?
From Software is the company that makes the Soulsborne games, Cody, and even publishes them in Japan. It's Elden Ring that is the GOAT you're referring to. You understand now, yes?
Elden Ring was supposed to be like the game of the year.
Elden Ring was Game of the Year 2022, Cody. Were you not paying attention? I thought you did a live stream on it. Or was I just dreaming that one up?
It was supposed to be like this big, big deal. And there were all these like weird narratives surrounding Tears of the Kingdom, you know, from like the marketing and just like how Nintendo didn't show anything, and the delay, which a lot of people like still will continue to insist was due to the fact that Nintendo was scared of Elden Ring. Like there was
Elden Ring was a big deal because it brought From Software's punishingly difficult gameplay into an open world format, which means we can now explore a fairly large open world that actually has genuine challenge when most other games don't. Also, I just looked it up, and the reason that Eiji Aonuma gave was because Nintendo wanted to make sure that everything in Tears of the Kingdom was polished up and 100% finished. Nintendo wasn't scared of Elden Ring. Why would they be? The only one I see claiming that Nintendo is scared of Elden Ring is you, Cody.
Elden Ring fans were unbelievably obnoxious, right?
Awfully high and mighty of you to say something like that, Cody, but whatever. Please continue.
All throughout 2022, and for the first half of 2023, we saw, well, the first quarter of 2023.
Okay, sorry to interrupt him in the middle of his point there, if you want to call it that, but that little stitch in his video is his own doing, not mine. Must be something wrong with his camera, like it's dying or something, but I just wanted to say that that is the peak of Cody Lee's editing.
For the first quarter of 2023, there was a big, big push to kind of pretend that Tears of the Kingdom wasn't going to be nearly as good, that Elden Ring would go on to be like one of the best, most well-received games ever made, that Zelda was like just an irrelevant like mark on history, right? Like Zelda was a dying brand.
Cody, who on God's green earth is saying that Zelda is a dying brand? I honestly think you're just making most of this crap up, especially when you consider that Tears of the Kingdom sold 10 million units in its first 3 days.
And of course, this is a mindset that like the industry has been trying to push since like the 90s, ever since the introduction of Sony PlayStation. Ever since, like, you know, even as early as Ocarina of Time, we saw these weird conspiracies being pushed that Metal Gear Solid was better than Ocarina, that like, every Zelda game after Ocarina was just a stale rehash of it.
Cody, most of what I saw on the first page of a Google search result suggests that even most Metal Gear Solid fans like Ocarina of Time more. And I'll gladly throw my voice into that chorus because Ocarina of Time was awesome, my guy. That, nostalgia for the game, and the fact that Metal Gear Solid doesn't really sound like my kind of game.
And now we're kind of seeing with Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild that like, these graphics, they're ugly. Like there's nothing impressive about this incredible physics engine. There's nothing like interesting or fresh and original about these ideas. They're just rehashes of Ubisoft games. They're not like From Software games at all, which are just peak open world action RPGs, right?
I'll actually side with Cody for once and say that Breath of the Wild's physics engine was really cool, but everything else about the game, to me at least, was done better by other games. Combat was done better in Dark Souls. The graphics were done better by pretty much every other game out there, even though I do really, really like Breath of the Wild's graphics, but that's about where the buck stops for my love of Breath of the Wild. To me, everything else Breath of the Wild did got stomped on by other games, and that's including Skyrim, by the way.
The narrative was going The narrative was going along those lines for a very long time until Tears of the Kingdom actually came out. Until people got to see it and got to play it and got to experience it for the first time. Not only is Tears of the Kingdom like better than Breath of the Wild in a lot of ways, it's doing a lot of things that a lot of games simply aren't doing, period.
Such as?
Like when people used to say that like Tears of the Kingdom was ripping off like Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts, they neglected to mention the fact that like Nuts and Bolts was not a proper Banjo-Kazooie game.
Trust me when I say that no one was saying that Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts was a real Banjo-Kazooie game.
It was not a 3D platformer with vehicle building mechanics, right? The way Zelda is a 3D Breath of the Wild game.
Zelda Breath of the Wild is an open world game, numbnuts. The same thing Tears of the Kingdom is.
With vehicle building mechanics, right? Zelda took the idea of like building things, sticking them together, and like giving all these cool vehicles, and really made something cool, fresh, and interesting with it.
Maybe, but guess what, Cody? Minecraft did that exact same thing years before Tears of the Kingdom or even Breath of the Wild came out. It did most of that stuff before those two games were even thought about by the folks over at Nintendo HQ in Kyoto. So how exactly can what Tears of the Kingdom did be fresh, interesting, and unique when Minecraft did it literal years earlier? Well, except for the vehicle building anyways. I'll give you that one, Cody, the vehicle building.
Like when you like think outside the box in this game, when you like make bridges out of like 30 logs, or build a boat, or like build a glider, right? And then like use those tools to like accomplish some goal in some way, shape, or form. Like you really get a sense that this is a masterpiece. There's nothing like this out there, period. And of course, there are plenty of people who are acknowledging this. Lots of like game developers on Twitter are like admitting that like they are way, way behind Nintendo, but I've been looking through Twitter for the past several minutes,
and there wasn't a single game developer saying how they were way behind Nintendo, because quite frankly, they aren't. However, I did see a crap ton of funny memes of Tears of the Kingdom stuff on Twitter. I mean, there is some pretty cool stuff you can do in Tears of the Kingdom, but having said that, I still don't think it's my cup of tea.
A very real demographic of people who still refuse to admit it. They insist that there's something wrong with the physics engine. They insist the game isn't all that original. They insist there's something wrong with the weapon durability system, which was not true even in Breath of the Wild, but in Tears of the Kingdom, if you're having problems with weapon durability, that's because you don't know how fusion works.
I haven't heard anyone talking bad about the physics engine, but most of what Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom did have been done by other games, and to me at least better, except for the physics engine. Again, I'll give Cody that one. What I will not give Cody, Nintendo, or anyone else who likes Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom is the weapon durability system, or as I like to call it, the armament fragility system. Dude, the armament fragility system has literally no reason whatsoever to be in either game. And if you say, oh well, you just don't understand fusion, then you are straw-manning. Cody, I don't like equipment durability in any game, and I sure as crap don't like Breath of the Wild's and Tears of the Kingdom's weapon durability system, because the weapons will only last you 3 fights at best, and at worst, 2 to 3 swings on the same monster. I've heard some people make the argument that later in the games, it stops being such a problem, but I strongly disagree. Now, just like Jim Sterling, I'm going to list some games that I like to prove that this isn't just about Zelda's equipment durability system. In Dark Souls, equipment durability plays an integral part of the game's stress, and that the player will constantly have to ask themselves, oh, will my weapon last me until I can get to the next bonfire or boss? Am I ready for this challenge? Do I have enough repair powder to ensure that my weapon won't break during any of these fights and leave me defenseless? If you were to remove equipment durability from the Dark Souls games, then just like with Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, literally nothing would change. Which, ironically enough, Elden Ring proves, by the way. In Fire Emblem, each unit can only fight as many times as each number of each of their weapon durability lasts, and just like with Dark Souls mentioned earlier, in Fire Emblem, it plays an integral role in the gameplay, thankfully this time not involving stress, but in making sure that each unit can fight and defend themselves. If a unit doesn't have weapons, then it can't fight. Some of those weapons are also really flippin' rare, and with the durability mechanic in place, that means that you won't want to use those weapons unless it's really needed, and it prevents you from just plowing through everything, so it does do some good, I guess, but still. In most of these Fire Emblem games, a lot of those weapons that are rare have so few uses, and can often only be used by one or two specific units maybe, that it's not worth using them unless it's really needed. However, I hear that those are the same exact reasons why weapon durability was removed from Fire Emblem Fates and Fire Emblem Engage, thank God. Long story short, removing weapon durability wouldn't have changed too much in Fire Emblem, if anything at all. The Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind and the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion had equipment durability as well, and of the three that I've mentioned so far, these two have done it the best. See, repairing equipment in these games has a skill tied to it, which in turn can help you level one of your 8 stats, Strength in Morrowind, Endurance in Oblivion, meaning that those two games actually give the player a very good reason to damage their equipment so that they can repair it and thus gain the ability to carry heavier stuff with them in Morrowind or be able to take more hits before dying in Oblivion. Having said that, if you removed equipment durability, nothing would change. Are you beginning to see a pattern here yet, Cody? Taking weapon durability out of most games won't change a thing, and the exact same thing is true of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, especially when you factor in the fact that the Zelda series has worked for literal decades without any form of equipment durability, and the exact same thing goes for the two games where Aonuma thought that they would be a good idea.
But there is a very real push to try and downplay this game as much as possible. And I really wonder how much this is going to stick, because
I wonder how often you're going to continue saying that people are downplaying Nintendo, Cody, when you can't even be bothered to provide some bloody examples. You have said that people are downplaying Nintendo in darn near every single one of your streams, and yet you can't be bothered to put even a single name on screen. Makes it sound like you're trying to push an agenda or something. From here on, folks, if he brings up people trying to downplay Nintendo, then I'm just gonna fast forward, because we're still not halfway done with this video, I think.
I think when Breath of the Wild came out, a lot of people really convinced themselves that this was just a one-off thing, this was just a fluke, that Nintendo would go back to putting out mediocre Zelda games after this.
Oh, but I thought you said earlier in this very video, Cody, that Zelda was one of the greatest gaming series on the planet. And now after playing Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, all of a sudden, all the previous Zelda games that Nintendo made were mediocre? I swear, Cody needs to start writing down his lies and his opinions because he seems to forget about them pretty quickly. Maybe your videos are made as a coping mechanism? How many more minutes of Cody's inane drivel do we have to sit through? 7 minutes. Oh, Marika, have mercy on my soul.
The thing about Tears of the Kingdom, it's not necessarily that much better than Breath of the Wild. You know, both games are great. But the thing about Tears of the Kingdom is that it's a follow-up that's just as well received as the original.
Now, the game hasn't been out all that long when I made this video, but according to Metacritic, Breath of the Wild still has a higher review score than Tears of the Kingdom. That may change, but who knows? Give it some time and it'll most likely change and be higher, but it could be lower. Again, who knows, right?
It is a completely original new thing.
No, it isn't. When a good 60 to 80% of your game is a rehash of the last game that you made, it isn't original. That's like me saying that Fallout New Vegas was original despite it basically being a gigantic asset flip of Fallout 3. It's the same thing here. Tears of the Kingdom is basically an asset flip of Breath of the Wild. There you go. Now, having said that, I'm not going to say that Tears of the Kingdom is bad just because it reuses a crap ton of content from Breath of the Wild, because if I did that, I would have to say the exact same thing about Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas, not to mention several other games that I'm not going to list here, but just trust me, it would be a lot of games that I would have to say they're bad because they're, asset flips or they reuse content. Anyways, sorry for rambling about that. Moving on.
And, where was I going with this? What that means is that it's difficult, very difficult, for the gaming establishment, the media, the YouTubers, the shills, to try and pretend that, this is a fluke.
You had to sit there for several seconds thinking, and that's the best response you can come up with?
Right. it's impossible for them to pretend that like there are other franchises that do what Zelda does better.
Well, I mean, to me, Skyrim stomps all over the open world Zelda games, as does Elden Ring, so...
Fable was better.
Okay, so I was originally going to axe this one part like I did with the rest of this part of the video, but I have to ask, who on God's green earth is saying that Fable is better than Legend of Zelda, outside of preference of genre? They aren't even remotely similar to one another.
There was like a very God of War, like there were so many like examples of things like that. There was such a big push to try and like push the Zelda formula as being stale and outdated. Skyrim, Dark Souls were better. Like,
again, Skyrim and Dark Souls aren't anything like Zelda, and as such cannot be compared, so moving on.
And this is the same. The thing with Elden Ring is that like it's the same thing, right? Like all these franchises are propped up, they're weaponized against Nintendo, they're used to justify why game journalists and like gamers are not excited for the newest Nintendo thing, and then they're forgotten about.
What in God's holy name are you blathering about?
Because outside of that specific
Cody
thing,
Lee, were you
they
just
serve no
burping the
purpose.
worm on
They're not
camera?
particular.
Dude, I was hoping after the 2 times that DSP did that we would never have to deal with that nonsense again. On YouTube, at least. I mean, I don't know about any of you, but if I want to see someone stroking the hot dog, then I'll just go to Pornhub. Thank you very much. But after that, I'm honestly not too sure I want to continue this horrible mess. So with that, we'll end this video here. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye for now!